GoHighLevel Custom Objects has been a promising feature, but since its release, there's been a few gaps within workflows and other areas, but there's a new release that's just come out, and it's been the final piece to the puzzle for a build that I'm going to show you, which is currently a live client account, and they're a SaaS business and they run webinars. So what we needed to do was have webinars and registrations and make sure that we're sending them the right details before and after a webinar. So we'll jump right in. Here's a quick view of the objects. So we've got our standard objects, and the custom objects we see here is registrations and webinars. Now, the current configuration of this is I manually add in new webinars here, and it stores all the key data around the event of the webinar. Then when someone registers, there's a webhook that goes off from Zoom and comes into GHL and stores the registration information. And we add it also to the contact. So what I needed to do here was create an association between the contact and the webinar, and the contact also gets a new record under webinar registration. And we'll take a look at what that actually looks like. So webinar registrations, here's all the fields that we're using. And the main one here is webinar ID. That is kind of everything that glues it all together. We've got the date, Zoom link, all of those sort of things. Now, there are still a few gaps in custom objects, like you cannot use custom objects in emails or texts. So a lot of the times you're creating things to go back to the contact, which can be a bit of a headache, because if you've got multiple things going on, then it could become some confusion. But for the most part, with this use case, it's going to work. And I'll show you the final piece of the puzzle, which is a new workflow action that has been released. So here, head over to automation, and I'll give you a peek of what's been built. And we're going to add on some new things here. So here's your webhook from Zoom, creating the contact. We're adding all the information from the Zoom webinar, adding some notes. And then this is the magic record that's just been released, which is still in beta. Associate records. Before, I wasn't able to connect a registration or a contact to a webinar. So that was only done manually. So I had to just create the contact or update the contact and then add a record to the registration part, which wasn't ideal, but we were able to get by. But now it's going to be so much more cleaner, and we're going to do things post-webinar as well. So what I've connected here, associate records with webinar, and we're going to use the webinar ID that's stored, or that's coming through the webhook. And we're going to filter for a record with this webinar ID. So it's matching. Associate the latest created record. So yes, that's what we want to do. And there's a few other ones like the earliest. No, we want the latest. And then associate label is webinar. That's all we've got. So we'll save that. And what that actually looks like now, before, I'll just make sure I save that. And what that actually looks like, so in webinar, not webinar registrations, but the event webinar, we've got the ID. And then because those IDs match, whenever that webhook gets triggered, we now can have associations just pop up here. So there'll be multiple that come here. Right now, I was testing it and I've got myself there. So this is where we're at. And ideally, there's going to be 50 to 100 different webinar registrations all linked up here. And I can just quickly view what's the count. And then the addition to this, because now that we can associate records within the workflow, what we now want to do is notify people associated with this webinar of the replay, because that's the last step to this. They have to come in here, or myself will come in here. We'll add the recording, change the status to completed, and hit save. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm going to show you what we need to build in addition to this. So I'll go over to automations, So I've already published it, but I'm going to start this from scratch. So I'll delete this one. And we'll go over into create workflow. Now there's more options here. So whenever you create custom objects, there's object-based workflows, right? So we want to create a webinar-based workflow. So the idea or the use case here is staff member comes in and changes the event webinar and adds the recording link. So we want to go webinar has been changed. We only want to filter status, which has been changed to completed, and the webinar recording has changed. Those are the two triggers that we must have, and that filters out, someone coming in and changing the date, for example. Then we want to add associated records to a workflow, contact, webinar. And I haven't got the workflow built out yet. I'll show you that. But that is what the kind of final step will be. But before that, and I'll have to jump into another screen, the other issue with objects is you cannot use the objects within templates and SMSs and emails. So we've got to map everything back to the contact. But luckily, because I've already done that, I've already prepped it, all we need to do, I'll head back into custom fields. And this is looking great, by the way. This such an important cleanup, this new contact or new custom fields sort of view is. Go into the contact, go into folders. I've got a specific folder for webinars, and this is holding basic info. It's not the thing that's being sent, but just to reference, it will be overridden each time they register, so it doesn't save. But what I need it for is to send the actual recording. So we need to create, so we've got title, we've got date, we've got the link to join. We've got other existing user and their current platform if they're not. What we need, single line, is the Zoom replay link. Let's be very descriptive. And we want to hold it under webinars. I'm going to save that. The Zoom replay link in my custom field contact. So now we go back to the workflow. And we want to add a new action. We want to update. Let's get rid of this. And I'll find the exact one. Update webinar or associated record. So the associated records are all the contacts that were added at the start. And we don't need an owner. We need a field to update, which is we want to take the webinar recording. Oh, sorry, let's take a step back here. The object that we need to update is the contact. And now the fields that we will see is all the contact fields. And if I scroll all the way down, I've got the Zoom replay link. And now we've got the custom object. Webinar recording, that's what we want. And the associated label, all associated contacts. Yes, that's what we want. Save. So now essentially what's happening here is we're allowing, so once the webinar has been changed and we've got the details in there, we're updating all the contacts with this new piece of information that, hey, the webinar recording has been entered. So add it to the contacts associated with the webinar. Bit of a mouthful, but hopefully you can follow along. I'll keep this one open. I'll go back into the other tab, get my automation. And the automation that we're going to build is the send webinar link. Now it's in draft and I'll show you why. Now we can look at the email action. I've got a template here. And I want to update this. So we need to send a Zoom replay link. And that is the magic right now. So I'm going to just hyperlink it to this word here and save. I'm going to test this live to see if it's working. I actually haven't built this prior, so we'll see. Head out. Now you'll notice here I don't have a trigger. It doesn't need one because the final part of this webinar replay added. The final part to this workflow is this recent action that I've been using is add associated records to workflow. And then we're going to select the contact, the webinars, and we're going to find that automation that I just built. So I think it was send webinar link. And that is the final piece. Now the webinar is created. After the webinar is done, we're adding the link. And as soon as that thing has been changed, let's test this out. I'll just publish this. It's going to send the email. So let's have a look. Go back into webinars. Pretend the webinar is completed. We've pulled the webinar replay link from Zoom. We can see that I've been associated with this webinar, so I'm going to open it up. Now, I don't have a Zoom link, so I'm going to use this sign up URL. Actually, I'll use Google or something. Recording, https google.com, and change the status to completed and save. Now that's going to fire off the email. How cool is that? And you know, something that took me quite a bit to figure out is, yeah, saved me a bunch of time and saved this team a bunch of time. So ideally, let me open up this person's contact. They would have received an email with the webinar recording. Let's just wait and hope for it. Your webinar replay is here. Perfect. It's taking us to Google. Amazing. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense now. Like, Objects has been really cool to see, and it's just lacked some features, and as they've slowly built upon it, which is what GoHighLevel always do, it's starting to make things a little bit easier and makes a lot more sense now. So completely automating, you can probably use this for all events. You know, once the event has been completed and you want to send something to them, then you can use that. But yeah, that's the structure I've used for custom objects, in particular for webinar registrations. I've always found the best sort of use cases for custom objects is having maybe two different custom objects. So there's always the kind of the logs that you want to keep, and then the event kind of container for it where you're associating things with. But yeah, keen to hear anyone else that's building with custom objects and what they've been able to accomplish. But yeah, if you've got any feedback or need help with this, just let me know.